Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here today. We have quite the international group today. That's wonderful. So we've been talking about the Enzo Kyokan, the instructions to the cook, composed by Eihei Dogen, the 13th century Japanese Zen teacher, who, upon founding a monastery, recognized the need for some regulations, some rules, some expectations, so people knew how to behave in the with the various tasks that the monastery required. And one of these tasks was that of the cook. So these are instructions for the cook. But of course, we don't live in monasteries, and we're not full-time cooks, most of us. So the relevance here has to do with bringing the practice, bringing the practice of Zen, bringing the practice of Buddhism into everyday activities, one of which is preparing meals. So I think I'll start where we left off last time and read some selections from the text. And then we'll go back over and discuss some of them. I shall now take up the work of the Tenzo, the cook, covering a period of one complete day. After the noon meal, the Tenzo should go to the susu and kansu to get the rice, vegetables, and other ingredients for the following morning and noon meals. They just had two meals. Once he has this, he must handle them as carefully as if they were his own eyes. Renyang said, use the property and possessions of the community as carefully as if they were your own eyes. The Tenzo should handle all foods he receives with respect, as if it were to be used in a meal for the emperor. Cooked and uncooked food must be handled in the same manner. Next, all the officers meet in the kitchen or pantry and decide what food is to be prepared for the following day. For example, the type of gruel, the vegetables, the seasoning. In the Shanwen Shingui, it says, when deciding on the amount of food and number of side dishes for the morning and noonday meals, the Tenzo should consult with the other officers. Now, when this has been done, preparations for the next morning's meal begin. You must not leave the washing of rice or preparation of vegetables to others, but must carry out this work with your own hands. Put your whole attention into the work, seeing just what the situation calls for. Do not be absent-minded in your activities, nor so absorbed in one aspect of a matter that you fail to see the other aspects. Do not overlook one drop in the ocean of virtue. Again, in the Shanwen Shinkui, we find if the Tenzo offers a meal without a harmony of the six flavors and the three qualities, it cannot be said to have been served, that he serves the community. When washing the rice, remove any sand you find. In doing so, do not lose even one grain of rice. When you look at the rice, see the sand at the same time. When you look at the sand, see also the rice. Examine both carefully. Then a meal containing the 6 flavors and the 3 qualities will come together naturally. Sheifeng was once the Tenzo under Dongshan. One day, when Sheifeng asked, Do you wash? I'm sorry. One day, when Sheifeng was washing the rice, Dongshan happened to pass and he asks, Do you wash the sand and pick out the rice, or wash the rice and pick out the sand? Sheifeng replied, I wash and throw away both the sand and the rice together. Then what on earth do the residents eat? Dongshan said. In reply, Sheifeng turned over the rice bucket. On seeing that, Dongshan said, The day will come when you will practice under another master. That may be a bit confusing, but we'll get to it. So, going through this day, how the Tenso should organize himself or herself to, of course, himself at that time, all the monks were male, how the cook should organize himself, is talking about getting ready to prepare these 2 meals that the monks eat every day, and mentions handling the food he receives with respect, as if you're handling your own eyeballs. This is a trope that Dogen quotes from a prior teacher. But it's a very strong visual image, and it sends the message very clearly that one should handle things with extreme care. But then he talks about getting all the officers together to discuss the next day's menu. And this is interesting. He gets this idea from previous regulations that had been formulated in Chinese monasteries. Now, the Chinese monasteries that that Dogen experienced while he was in China were huge. There were like 1 or 2,000 monks, just very large institutions. Whereas Dogen is dealing with a handful of monks when he's starting his monastery. I don't know exactly how many, but we may be talking about 15, 20, 25 people. I don't know. It's not clear. But certainly not thousands. But it reinforces the notion of getting other perspectives, of discussing the menu, not just deciding on one's own what the menu should be for the next day, but talking it over, getting other perspectives. Probably as a means of producing harmony so that everyone has a say-so. Of course, these are just the officers, not all the monks, but the officers would at least reflect the viewpoint of others. But then he gets into this thing about washing the rice and putting your whole attention to the work. of separating the sand from the rice. Now, usually when we buy rice nowadays, I don't know if all of you wash the rice before you prepare it. Uh, I sometimes do and sometimes don't, because the likelihood of finding a stone in the rice today, when you buy it at the store, is very, very, very small. There may be other reasons for washing the rice, but in any case, at that time, contamination of the rice with sand that had been hand-picked out in the field, out in the paddy or however they harvested rice, um, was an important task. You had to just manually separate the sand and the rice. And he talks about doing this without sacrificing even a single grain of rice. Again, handling each thing as if it is your own eyeballs. But then, somewhat seems like a non sequitur, he goes into this story where um, an abbot enters the kitchen and sees a monk separating the sand from the rice and asks him this odd question. Do you wash the sand and pick out the rice, or wash the rice and pick out the sand? Now, it's part of Chan and Zen literature that the abbot will often do things like this. Will sort of enter in the midst of a monk doing something and ask an odd question. But the odd question is not just nonsense. It has the function of teaching. It's a teaching question. Do you take the sand out of the rice, or do you take the rice out of the sand? And the monk responds that I wash and throw away both the sand and the rice together. And then the abbot asks, well, what will the brothers eat? What will you feed the brothers if you've thrown them out together? And the monk proceeds to upend the rice bucket onto the floor, which would seem to be in stark contrast to handling each grain of rice as if it's your own eyeball. So what's going on? Why is this story interposed? And what is the story about? Well, we can only speculate, but oftentimes these stories have to do with meditation practice and sort of life practice in general. And in meditation practice, thoughts arise. And some of them are pleasant and expansive and make you think of enlightenment. And others are unpleasant, even embarrassing, just thoughts, your kind of shameful thoughts, or just boring thoughts, and make you think of delusion. So that during Zazen practice, there is enlightenment and delusion witnessed, awareness of these. And you separate the enlightenment from the delusion, or do you separate the delusion from the enlightenment? And the monk replies, you just upend them and drop both. Realizing that there is delusion in enlightenment and there is enlightenment in delusion, if you can see clearly. And zazen is practice in seeing clearly. And this seeing clearly is not only in zazen, but applies potentially to everything we do. Zazen being just the optimal exercise for practice. I think a couple quotes from the commentary of Uchiyama on this text are helpful here. So I'll read them. One is from page 61. Faith in Buddhism is the ability to recognize happiness and unhappiness, heaven and hell, all with the same eye, and to live out the life of one's total self with a capital S, despite the circumstances that arise. Faith in Buddhism is the ability to recognize happiness and unhappiness, heaven and hell, all with the same eye, and to live out the life of one's total self despite the circumstances that arise. And another quote, slightly different aspect of this notion, on page 63. At its very essence, life is contradiction, and the flexibility to forbear and assimilate contradiction without being beaten down by it, nor attempting to resolve it, is our life force. At its very essence, life is contradiction, and the flexibility to forbear and assimilate contradiction without being beaten down by it, nor attempting to resolve it, is our life force. So, encountering sand and rice. Yeah, when in this passage that I read about the Tenzo offering a meal with the harmony of 6 flavors and 3 qualities, there is a footnote that addresses some of this um, that Tom Wright helpfully included. The 6 flavors are bitter, sour, sweet, salty, mild, and hot. The 3 virtues or qualities are light and flexible, clean and neat, conscientious and thorough. So the ideal is to incorporate the 6 flavors harmoniously in everything that is prepared. And in doing so, as we do so, to demonstrate the qualities or the virtues of being flexible, neat, and thorough, conscientious. Those of you who do cooking, many of you do, um, know that there's a lot goes on in the kitchen that is not necessarily clean and neat and doesn't always go according to plan. So there's sand in the rice. And but there's rice in the sand. And the proposal here is to see all of that with the same eye and to, as Uchiyama says, to demonstrate your life force in the midst of all of that. So this section was about taking care of things, not only humans, not only being respectful to humans and attentive to humans, but also to inanimate objects, to the things we eat, to the things that surround us. Taking care, exercising that kind of attention and love, really, that incorporates treating things as if they were our own eyeballs. So I think the question is for us is, can you realistically give loving attention to everything you do, even the mundane tasks, even the things that are more mundane than cooking? Taking care of household chores or taking care of children, taking care of the yard, the apartment, the bathroom. Can this all be given loving attention? I think we'll stop there, and I'll leave you with that thought. But we'll go into breakout rooms and return in just a few minutes. Thank you very much for listening today.